He might go all the way. He gives it a ride. It's a chance. It'll be a goal. You beauty, mate. Wants to roll through. He can. Cometh the moment. Cometh the champion.
It's the same message on Rewind. Not competitive enough, don't work hard enough, and they just don't do it long enough. Enough with the excuses, just come out and tell us what we already know. This is a team rebuilding and we're not dumb. Comparing 2019 to 2017 is ignoring the gaping issues with the team on and off the field. You don't turn over half your team in 3 years and expect to compete with the best. Saturday night proved that, but just not good enough. You are listening to the Swans Blog SwansCast, the #1 Sydney Swans fans podcast. In this week's episode, we review the Swans' 5th round loss to Richmond on Saturday night. We talk about the midfield performance, turnovers, Longmire, Franklin, the good, the bad, the ugly, and we give you our Sunday champions and villains. I'm Justin Mitchell, and with me is SwansCast favourite Heather Quinlan. Heather, I know you weren't in Melbourne for the match, I was, but watching it on TV, did it seem like we just lacked that bit of an experience and skill that we just had back in 2017?
I think so, yep. I'm delighted to be back on the SwansCast after a bit of a break. So happy to be here today, giving you my 20 cents worth, and of course the listeners.
Yeah, we love having you on.
Watching on the TV, I very strongly got the impression, and please don't send the bomb squad after me, but I felt like that there's still some great quality players in that team, senior players, but there just are a few too many B graders and young kids whose skills and experience aren't really quite up to it yet.
Yep.
And I just feel like that you need to have a core group of A graders to get you through and to see you through when times are tough. And at the moment, the core group of A graders is just too small to carry the team on its shoulders.
It is, and like Longmire has been sort of referring back to 2017 for like the last 2-3 rounds now. He did it again in the post-match conference. He said, we've been in this situation before. 2017 is a good example. We have the team, we have the quality, we have the skill to get ourselves out of this. Do you think it's fair to compare this team to 2017, given the fact that in the last 3 years, the Swans have debuted now 20 new players?
The answer is no, but I think that was a rhetorical question that you asked there, Justin, because I'm sure that you can point to all manner of factors as to why that's not the case. And look, 2 years is a long time in football, in the same way that a week is a long time in politics. So, teams have gone from the top of the pile to the deepest pile of poo in 12 months, let alone 2 years. So I feel like and given that coaches, generally speaking, do not like to compare seasons, I think that's a bit disingenuous of Longmire, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit of a cop-out, to be honest. You look at Richmond's a really good example. Tail end of 2016, they were getting slammed by everyone post a pillar. They had got thrashed by the Swans. They looked like the Swans were about to set 180 points on them. They come out, they do a complete review of the entire organisation. They come out and say, we've actually got the right man, we've got the right processes, we just need to get some more people around him to help him out. Not even 12 months later, premiers. And their brand of football has been an extremely difficult brand of football to play against and has brought them to another preliminary final. And they look like they may as well go to another prelim again this year, just playing the same thing for the last 3 years, which is an evolution of what the Swans played 6-7 years ago.
Yep, a lot of pressure, a lot of tackling, a lot of commitment. They just work really, really, really hard, and it's pretty hard not to admire that kind of style.
Yes. So, look, top of the agenda, we have a couple of things we're going to discuss in brief. We're not going to go too deep into them, because otherwise we might be here all day talking. But the first one, John Longmire and the game plan, game style. Heather, what on earth is it at the moment? Because I'm kind of racking my brain here, and I have absolutely no idea what we are playing.
No, either do I. And I think that's because I'm sure John Longmire thinks he knows what he's doing and actually does develop a plan. But I'm fairly certain that he doesn't have absolute confidence in them to actually get it done, whatever it is. And that is probably coming through. I mean, he must in his heart of hearts, look at Callum Sinclair, who tries his heart out, and he must look at that and think, where is my decent, proper ruckman? Where is Sam Naismith? When can I get him back on the field?
He's
So
not
that
going to
he's
be
trying
back until possibly next year. So when Charlie Gardner came out and said, I had the knee arthroscopy, he's not looking like he's going to be back at all until either late this season or next season.
Exactly, but that's pivotal for a team, is to have a quality ruckman, and unfortunately, we've got somebody who's doing his best, but is a B grader in that particular position. He'd be much better served potentially
Yeah.
as the backup ruckman and working down in the forward line. So I feel terribly sorry for Callum Sinclair. But look, getting back to the original question, I think the rule changes, the 666, don't favour the Swans
No.
anyway with their current setup. And I just feel like that he's not being adventurous enough. He's being too conservative.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, at what point is he just going to sort of throw the shackles off and just say, look, boys, just, run it at all costs and play with a bit of sort of flair and pizzazz. And if we go down by 100 points, well, so be it.
Yeah. I think there's that need to come out and really announce what their expectations of the team is at the moment. And I think their expectations internally is the team is still good enough to compete finals. Whereas literally everyone on the outside is saying this team cannot compete finals. They are too inexperienced, too young. They're missing the cattle. Naismith is out, arguably, potentially for the season. McVeigh, Charlie Gardner again last week, suggested that he may not even return. Malikan's fallen off the edge of a cliff, and even in the kneeful, he looks like he's floundering. Our recruits that were brought in are B graders barely. They're performing at that level. It's really difficult to sort of see where some of this improvement can come from. But Heather, I just want to raise this question with you before we move on to the next point, which was also related to Jude Bolton's tweet, which we'll discuss in a moment. But do you think we are over-possessing the ball at the moment? Because we had almost 80 more disposals than Richmond. We had almost 40 more marks. And going back last week, we had more than 20 more marks and more than 20 more possessions than Melbourne. And combined, we've actually lost both games by a combined score of about 50-odd points.
Yeah, I do. And I'm assuming, yeah, so a lot of handballing in tight, a lot of unnecessary handballs when a direct kick would probably be, better suited, or, at least give it a shot. But they seem to lack the confidence to do that. So I'm assuming that the reason why we're racking up an awful lot of possessions but not really going anywhere with it is because we're coming out of defence and we're going backwards and we're going sideways and we're swapping sides and we're doing all manner of things, but we're not actually moving forward a hell of a lot.
Yeah, and once it goes back over the back into the defence, like last night was a perfect example. The defenders just couldn't even catch a breath. And they were saying that on the broadcast. Dermot Burton was just saying they don't have the skills, the elite skills that they need to move the ball out of defence. And if you're at the ground, you could see clearly how stagnant and static the players were, which pretty much leads us into Jude Bolton's tweet, which is the second of the things on the 4 agenda. And his tweet basically said that the current state of the Swans, they really, really lack skills to properly execute. They have players who just handball under pressure. They throw it to other players and they make it the other players' problems to deal with the ball. They really struggle with pressure and tackles. And he said basically they are either devoid of confidence or completely out of form, and their quality entries inside forward 50 is an absolute joke. And he went on to say that until a few of those addressed, the Swans, they will not improve.
Yep, and I think that tweet has been greeted with a resounding, tick of approval from
Yep.
many, many people. I mean, certainly from me and presumably from you as well.
Yes, yep.
Yep, I think he's sort of hit the nail on the head. And, of course, you can't just develop confidence and what have you out of thin air. So that has to come from just getting the basic skills right. So one can only presume there's going to be doing some serious drills at work with their actual ball handling and disposal skills because, that was, you didn't have to be Einstein to see that that Richmond helped create the environment where those occurred. But there were so many from the Swans, it was remarkable to watch, to be honest.
Yeah.
We used to be an extremely clean handling team, very good in tight, very good decision makers, and obviously not having McVeigh there is not helpful. But
yes,
yeah, the level of turnovers was pretty woeful. And yeah, it's sort of back to the drawing board, I would have thought, at training this week.
Oh, yes, big time. Well, look, on to one of the more positive things. Lance Franklin is now ranked 7th in the all-time goal-kicking list, the VFL AFL goal-kicking list. So his 4 goals moved him past Essendon great Matthew Lloyd. I kind of watched his game, and again, this is Longmire's comparison to 2017. I think back to like 2016, 2017, he was really good. He was leading. He was fast. He was very strong physical. Now he looks stiff as a board. He's not really leading. He's not fast, and he seems to have lost like 2 or 3 yards of pace. He's kicking. He seems to have lost about 10, 15 sort of meters on his kicks alone. Do you sort of see it as an injury kind of issue that they're kind of trying to play him through injury, or do you think it's the lack of training over the last 3 years where he's had virtually no preseason and no training altogether?
It's actually hard for me to tell, Justin. I couldn't say that definitively, obviously not knowing, being right in there. It could just be that Father Time is catching up with him. And now, look, Franklin at his sort of 75% of his best is still extremely good. So, he's still one of their best players. So it is hard to know. He's obviously had, he had very limited training last year. He had an interrupted pre-season. So one can only assume he's not in the peak of physical condition. He does look stiff. I reckon his back still gives him grief.
Yeah.
It's one of those things he just plays through. I haven't really got much more to add other than that, really.
That's completely fine. Now on to another player. A very typical Swans milestone match, not particularly from this player, but from the team in general. We have been very, very poor with dealing with major milestone matches. I would say historically more than recently. But Kieran Jack played his 250th game. It was probably not a game that he'd really want to remember. It wasn't a particularly good game from him or from the team. And it's kind of hard to see his last 2 games. It's kind of hard to see what kind of place he has in the team, Heather.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's sort of sad, really, in many ways. I mean, it was terrific to see, the Richmond players and the Sydney players, gave him a guard of honour last night off the field. That was terrific. He deserved it. An achievement of 250 games is not to be sneezed at. It shows longevity, skill, talent, hard work, all of the above. A decorated player for the Swans. I really feel that he should have bowed out by now. Maybe he was waiting for this. I don't know that there's a lot of room for sentiment in football these days, so I can only hope that the coaches legitimately thought that he could make a genuine contribution on the field. But, yeah, I feel like there probably won't be another milestone game for Kieran Jack with the Swans, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does seem like that, and we have been ruthless in the past. I mean, we put Ryan O'Keefe out to pasture against his will. There've been other players that we've moved on, traded on. We moved Hanbury, and that was certainly against his will. Whether or not that's in benefit for us is, we're going to need a bit of 2020 hindsight in a year or two to really see the change there. But I think you're right in that he's probably not going to last long enough for another major milestone. And I guess he's probably one of the 4 or 5 players that's expected to retire at season's end.
Yeah, I'd expect that. I think that he is an intelligent man. I think he's just got his masters in something or other, business or whatever he achieved in the off season. He is a smart man. He's prepared for his future, and he's married. Moving on, I suspect that he'll be bowing out as soon as he feels like he's reached the end.
All right, time for our Sunday champions and Sunday villains. So I'll kick things off with our Sunday champions, and mine is Jude Bolton for the tweet, basically tweeting everything that is on our mind. Now, we've covered it a little bit, so we're not really going to cover it much, but he is my champion. Heather, who is your champion?
My champion does not play for the Swans. My champion was Dustin Martin. He just had a terrific match. I actually knew he would have a terrific match because, of course, his form had been indifferent in his, I think, 3 other previous matches. He then was absolutely smothered by De Boer in that match against GWS. He lashed out. He got himself suspended for a week.
Yep.
His suspension was reduced from 2 weeks down to 1 on appeal, which is why he played last night. And I would have actually, had I had $1 million in my bank account, I would have put it on Dustin Martin having a terrific match last night, because he would have been so fired up.
Yeah, he came out and he was breathing fire, and look, he was a bit quiet to begin with, but 3 goals, and he was certainly one of the most influential players on the ground, and literally every time he got the ball, he did something good with it, which is
I think,
quite a lot
yeah, I
different to
think
what our
so.
players did.
Yeah, he was dangerous. He looked
He
dangerous, and
did,
that is
yeah.
Dustin Martin at his best. I mean, there's a reason why he won the Brownlow medal a couple of seasons ago, because he was looked dangerous all of the time. And
Yeah.
to me, last night he was showing signs of that. Whenever he had the ball, I got extremely nervous.
Yeah, and he torched Rampy a few times on the leads. There was one particular time, I believe it was in the second quarter, the ball went inside forward 50 and Rampy gave him way too much space, and Martin was very clinical with the contested mark.
Yeah, yep, he was. And look, he could have kicked. He could have kicked more. I'd like to mention Rampy in dispatches anyway. I still think he had a terrific
Yeah.
game. I thought he did a good job on Lynch, and there were a couple of occasions also too when he punched the ball when Martin could easily have taken possession and
Yeah.
maybe kicked another goal or two. So I mean, I think that Rampy did a power of work, and look, without him, we could have been beaten by probably 10 goals.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, for your Sunday villain, Heather?
Yeah, my Sunday villain is Zach Jones. Now, Zach Jones, on some websites, was listed as having a good match.
I wouldn't say he had a good match.
No, I didn't enjoy his match, mainly because he was one of the absolute villains and culprits in terms of turnovers in the first half, and this is where the match was won. I mean, the match was over, in my mind anyway, going into pretty early in the third quarter.
Yeah.
So I just looked at Zach Jones's performance, and he just had the fumbles. He delivered the ball poorly. His brain only seems to be switched on some of the time anyway. And
Yep.
look, he may well be affected by a bit of lack of confidence at the moment as well. I can't blame him for that. I just get very frustrated by players who, have a really terrific match, and then almost as the next minute they're playing really ordinarily. I have to say that I prefer my players to be consistently good, and Zach Jones is not one of those. He's not sort of matured in that respect. And I've named him my Sunday villain somewhat reluctantly because he did actually improve in the second half, but I just feel like he was a massive contributor to the turnover problem that occurred in the first half. So he's my villain.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong about that at all. At the ground, you could see that he'd get the ball, he'd sprint, he would kind of just sprint without making up any kind of decision or looking what was ahead. And he'd either get caught with the ball, turn it over, drop it and get done for holding the ball, or he would boot it long and high into the forward line when it was 1-on-3 and there was no chance of a Swans mark. So when he was doing those long high kicks inside forward 50, they're not registered as like turnovers or clangers, but they reduced his disposal efficiency. And he must have done that about 6 or 7 times in the first half alone.
Yep, enough said, the better. What about your villain?
My villain is John Longmire. Now, I do this reluctantly like you. I am not a Longmire hater. I'm not a Longmire out kind of person. But I did do a comparison to John Longmire and the Sydney Swans to Arsene Wenger and Arsenal last year. So for those that follow EPL, we got a lot of responses that supported the comparison between the two sides and the two coaches. The thing, I suppose the issue for me is that he is a micromanager. He's known to be a micromanager and he's known to be very inflexible during match day. A lot of the changes during match day, going back last year and the year before, have been credited to coaches such as Henry Playfair, Josh Franco, and Stuart Dew. None of those coaches are no longer there. Rhys Shaw left at pretty much the 11th hour on the eve of the season to go to North Melbourne as an assistant. And basically, we lost arguably the best assistant coach in the league who had only just won one of the top coaches awards. I think it was like Assistant Coach of the Year award. So, yeah, we're in this sort of situation where we've got a very junior coaching team. I'm not sure enough delegation is going on. The skills have plummeted. The plan and style is non-existent and incoherent. And it just has all those hallmarks of 2010 to 2013 Arsene Wenger Arsenal, where it was just a clueless, lost side. I see that. I see that coming. I think we're just drifting at the moment.
Yep, I don't disagree with you. And it's, again, I like John Longmire. He seems like a really decent bloke with a good sense of humour, but I just don't know that he's I don't know. I think it might be a bit short on inspiration.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about some of his coaching choices. I mean, how much quality and input is Stevie J providing our forward line? I can't see
Yeah.
his stamp. I can't see his stamp anywhere,
Well, there's
to be honest.
snaps. All the players are snapping now.
Oh, yeah, the snaps. Yeah, yeah, right. Great. Snaps. Excellent. Right. What about a decent, set drop punt when the situation
Well,
calls for it? Anyway,
Plugger's
enough
gone.
said.
Plugger's no longer coaching. So that's where that's gone.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, moving right along.
We're moving on to the weekend review. Well, I'd like to be, one of those games where we go, oh, we've got tons to review. We've got tons of good stuff to talk about. Not really for this case, unfortunately. Richmond, like last year, and I know you wrote the report last year, Heather, and I love the report because I read it when I was in America and New York. And we got up at 4 a.m. to watch that match last year, and it was the same thing again. They wanted the ball more, they were hungrier, they worked harder, they got 2 or 3 players to almost every single contest and just outworked the Swans. But it was painful to watch, Heather.
It was painful to watch. I'm trying to think about that report. Was that the hot chip analogy?
Yes, the hot chip analogy. I quoted
Yeah.
that in the player ratings, and we got some great responses on the player ratings so far. I admit I was a bit harsh when I did it, but I was still a bit seething, and I stand by my comments that Ben Ronk and George Hewitt need to go to the NEFL.
Yep, I actually have made a couple of notes on a document, and I'm having a look at it now. And my one of my comments on that was that Ben Ronk, sadly, he's one of those who is hopelessly out of form.
Yes.
He's got a lot of talent. Want to see him back again, but he really needs to go away and just find himself because Ben Ronk, terribly out of form, and George Hewitt. I've never seen actually George Hewitt. He's one of those players who actually is very consistent, but he's now consistently not doing it for me.
Well, he's been consistently bad this year, which is quite a shame. It's a massive drop from how he was last year and the year before. We keep saying every week, and I think we've said this since round 1, you don't reach top 5 in the best and fairest at any club playing the level of football he's playing now. I mean, you could say Carlton, who have been cellar dwellers for the last, I don't know, yonks, like 4 or 5 years. Even their top 5 players are still quality players, and they play pretty well.
The problem for me with George at the moment, Justin, is that he, to me, is looking slow. He's looking like he's
Yeah.
lost a little pace, and I'm thinking, well, unless he can find that again, he's going to have problems,
Yeah.
playing his role.
And I think that's symptomatic of the team as a whole. They do look slow. I don't know whether or not that is every other team has just got faster, and with the rule changes they've had to. Certainly some of the play has become more intelligent, and on-field leaders have become more important than ever, which is something I think the Swans are seriously lacking at the moment. They are really, really lacking in depth for on-field leaders. We have 3 captains, but I don't think either 3 of those are actively leading the team in any way whatsoever at the moment.
No, and I think we've had some discussions in the past, Justin, about the merits or not of having Josh Kennedy as a captain because we feel
Yeah.
like it may dilute his on-field skills. So probably don't need to go into that again. But yeah, I don't see terrific leadership from Luke Parker, even though I admire him as a player.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel that potentially that we do have some terrifically quick players, but I think in general, when you are lacking in form and when you aren't playing well, because you're not playing with terrific purpose and you don't know exactly what you're doing and you're making it up on the run and
Yeah.
you're under a lot of pressure, so you're making some poor decisions. I think that actually makes you look slower because you're actually not, moving forward with a lot of purpose.
Yes. And the ball's just stagnant. It's sitting there. It keeps pinging backwards and forwards or across the field. Speed, leg speed's one thing, but the ball will always travel faster than anyone can run. You can kick 50 metres a lot faster than you can run 50 metres. You can handball 25 metres a lot faster than you can run 25 metres. I think at the moment, the Swans as a whole, foot speed, they look like they've all lost a couple of yards of pace, but the ball movement is just so incredibly slow. They're just hanging on to it too much. And Dermot Burton said on the broadcast, because I watched the replay, I had to do the report and the ratings because I was pretty upset at the game and kind of switched off after a while. He said that not only do the Swans lack the foot skills to be able to properly execute moving it from the back, they're playing an outdated game plan, which does not work in today's game because what Damien Hardwick said, it's still a turnover game. That with the pressure being so high, no team is really trying to play that sort of half-back, linchpin, sling it out of defence kind of style. No team's playing that at the moment, or certainly not executing it well.
No, and I think the Swans would be probably better served working out a way to improve their play out of clearances, in particular centre clearances, and getting some clean, quick ball into the forward line.
Yeah.
And then at least if you can exert some some scoreboard pressure, then at least that gives you the opportunity to build a bit of confidence in the game as you go along. Because at the moment, we're not really able to, dominate out of the centre. And in fact, we're struggling in that area of the game in general.
Yeah.
So if they could even improve that, that would be absolutely terrific as far as I'm concerned. I think that would make a real difference.
Yeah, look, for the first 4 rounds of the AFL season, the Swans were ranked 18th for scores conceded from centre clearances, which is pretty bad.
Yeah, that's really bad.
Fortunately, we managed to concede just 1 goal, which is a far improvement by centre clearances. Unfortunately, this is where it gets really bad, is that we conceded 81 of 89 points from turnovers. And some of those were inexcusable, like incredibly bad turnovers. Some of them I've never seen before in my life.
Yeah, that's a pretty ugly stat. As stats go, that one tells a very, very big story.
It does. And look, I'd love to go to the AFL site, look up the stats, but fortunately they've changed them. But I know that Swans were around about between the 18th and 14th ranked team for centre clearance differentials. They have been getting comprehensively beaten in that area throughout the season. And again, on the weekend, they got beaten comprehensively. So we can move into some of the stats from the weekend, Heather.
This is going to be ugly listening, folks, so just stand by.
Yes, this is not pretty listening. We overpossessed the ball something fierce. It was 76 more disposals. We had 2 more free kicks, if you can believe that. And despite the fact we got absolutely punished in centre clearances, we had 3 more clearances. So we were 32 to 29. This is where it gets pretty bad for us. We had 9 less centre clearances, 8 to 17. 22 less inside 50s, 64 to 42. We had 6 less contested possessions. We had 15 less tackles, 71 to 56. And 20 less tackles inside forward 50, 22 to 2. That just goes to show that when they got it in, they kept it in. When we got it in, it just pinged straight back out. We had 8 more turnovers, despite the fact that Richmond scored almost their entire score from turnovers. And we had 38 more marks. So when we got it, if you have a look at the heat map, if any of you have the AFL stats or at least the AFL subscription on your phone through Telstra, or you've paid for the subscription, look at the heat maps from both teams. Richmond had it on the outer wing between half-back and full forward. Sydney had it almost permanently between full-back and half-back flank. It's incredible just where the ball lived, and I think...
Is that some sort of record there, having 2 tackles inside your own 50?
I don't know, but that certainly is, if it is a record, that would be a very, very bad record to have. This Swans team over the last couple of years have been setting some pretty good and some pretty bad records, and I honestly hope that isn't a record.
Anyway.
Yep.
Those stats, there's nothing pretty in those stats at all.
No, so some of the things that Richmond did was they went 1-on-1 across the field, and Sydney, they were kind of getting some outs earlier in the game in the first quarter and early in the second quarter. They could get the overlap, they could get the out, and we hit the lead temporarily. We were up by a couple of points for about 5 or 6 minutes. But once Richmond hit the lead again, that was it. They kept on leading and they never got headed afterwards. I thought like the first 40 minutes of play from Sydney was a good level of play. It looked competitive at the ground. It looked like Richmond were on top, but it looked like Sydney was sort of hanging in there and just chipping away. And they had a few really good chances to actually hit the scoreboard and potentially get in front. They just butchered the ball something fierce going forward.
Yeah, and I noted that John Longmire had sort of said afterwards that he praised Richmond's pressure game and he said that the Swans had prepared for it. I don't disbelieve him. I'm sure they did, but they were still exposed by that pressure. And to me, they didn't really look like they had any way to get around it. I couldn't see any spark or initiative there, which was kind of disturbing. I don't know what you
Yeah.
thought about that.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't really until midway through the third quarter when they figured out that instead of just trying to rush the ball, they have to possess the ball and deny Richmond the ball. But the problem then was they weren't going past the back flank. They would possess the ball with 20-metre, 15-metre chip kicks that would go absolutely
Yeah.
nowhere. They weren't able to get any numbers ahead of the ball. There was often anywhere from 14 to 18 players in Richmond's defensive 50. So that even when the Swans got the ball, they couldn't go anywhere because all the players were behind the ball, whereas Richmond always had players up the field so they could rebound it back in.
Yeah, that's like the great circle of death in football, because
It
what
was.
happens then is that you do get the ball and then you're moving it up the field and you go, oh, who am I going to kick to?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, dear, there's no one to kick to. Oh, dear, kick, kick, kick. Oh, dear, we've lost the ball. And then it comes straight back again.
Exactly. And there was a Dustin Martin goal where we got it out of defence, got it to midfield. I think it was Heaney who just dropped the ball. And then within about 3 seconds, it was sailing through their goals. And that was because all of our players had pushed up to try and create the extras in midfield. Richmond hadn't committed as many numbers. They didn't need to because they had players back in defence. Ball was turned over. They had the extras. They still had players in the forward line. Sydney were on their heels and bang, just goal. And that last sort of 4 minutes of the second quarter was quintessential Richmond play, and it was basically the Swans at their worst. They were their own worst enemies. They get the ball and they just lost it, and they were doing it something fierce. It was unbelievable to watch. But look, Richmond, they took their numbers out of defence and now their forward line to have 1 or 2 extra at the contest, and it was telling because despite the fact that the Swans killed Richmond for clearances around the ground, they always were able to get the ground balls. They always outnumbered the Swans at the contests. They were always, even the 50-50s, they always won the 50-50s. It was incredible how many 50-50 contests they won. Unfortunately, Champion Data don't like to publish those stats on the AFL site, but if you were able to get a hold of them, you would find that Richmond were way ahead in the Swans in that category.
I think if I was a Tigers supporter, I'd be feeling quite excited at the moment because you can see that there is their premiership window is still open.
And they played exactly like they did in 2017. And they did it without their best 4 players.
Yep, it's scary. It's scary what they're going to be able to do a bit later on in the season. You know, when they get their captain back, Cochin back, and they and then obviously we won't see Rance again this season. But really, there's a lot of upside to the Tigers. So let's start practicing the Tigers song. So we've got a fallback.
Yellow and black. It's pretty funny when you're at the ground and they win. The only words that the Richmond faithful know is yellow and black. But it was the old Longmire trick. Let's just throw Sam Reid back in defence or throw Isaac Heaney back in defence. Stop throwing the extra back in defence. Put the extra where the ball is, Win the freaking ball. Get the ball out. You don't pack the defence because if you pack the defence, you got no one to kick it to. So we had 7, 8, 9 defenders regularly throughout the second and third quarter. It wasn't until the fourth quarter when we just went, screw it, let's try and kick some goals. Oh, geez, we kicked 4 goals to 2 in the last quarter. What do you know?
The only time I like to see an extra in defence is when you are just putting a little bit of a buffer in there when you're leading at the back end of, say, the third or the fourth quarter, and you're just trying to just ensure that you're going to hang on to the ball when push comes to shove. That's the only time I want to see an extra in defence. Yeah,
except for what we do now, which is pretty much an extra goes in defence almost straight off the first whistle, straight off the first bounce, which is really, it's utterly disappointing. Tom McCartan, backwards and forwards, just leave him in defence. He looks a lot better defender than he does a forward. And to be honest, he looked like a lost little soul out there on the field. He didn't really know what he was doing.
No, I didn't even know he was out in the field until the third quarter. So that says a lot too, yeah.
He was cutting daisies and running in circles. That's all he was doing. Sam Reid needs some grippo, or maybe he needs some knee-follow. Either one.
Yeah, he had the dropsies again. I noticed that last week, and he had the dropsies again. And obviously his goal kicking can be a bit, up and down as well. But no, he just didn't have an impact for me. Didn't have an impact.
Yeah. Look, some positives, obviously, and then we'll move on to the good, the bad, the ugly. Positives for me was Oliver Floren's first quarter was really, really good. It was exceptional. George Stewart actually had a first quarter that was pretty good, and he was pretty much dreadful after that. Jordan Dawson, 31 disposals, his best game. I thought he was one of our best players. And where Jake Lloyd seriously failed in distribution from the back flank, I thought Jordan Dawson was superb. His kicking efficiency was really, really high, and he was hitting a lot of targets, especially when the Swans were struggling. And he took, I think, 8 or 9 marks.
Yeah, I noticed his game as well. The thing that I've actually noticed with Jordan Dawson is that you can actually see visible improvement in playing a few games. He has actually improved a lot. He seems to be reading the play better. He does have very good hands, and he is generally a good decision maker. So I definitely give Jordan Dawson a tick. And of course, as I've already sort of mentioned before, I feel like Dane Rampy deserves a slap on the back because he had to do a power of work last night. And for the most part, he was top shelf.
Yep.
And hats off to him because he had he had to play on a difficult player, but he also had to basically fill in the gaps where the others really were, letting a few things through. So he had a huge role. He doesn't have, a reliable Reg Grundy there to help him out.
Yeah.
So he's the senior man down there at the moment, and I'd like to sort of say that I feel like Dane Rampy's form thus far this season has been very good. I know it's a bit early to be talking about All Australian, but I think if he could keep that up, he would certainly have his hand up for that.
Yeah, there's certainly a chance, and look, it's going to be difficult for the Swans to really have any AA representatives this year if they keep playing the way they're playing. But now, Heather, it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I will kick things off. So my good was James Rowbottom's triple effort in the last quarter. So he got the ball. He beat his man cold, absolutely bumped him off the ball. Got the ball. That was his first effort. Second effort was get the ball and dishing off and turning the ball over almost straight away. Pretty typical of the Swans' performance. But the thing that really impressed me was his next 2 efforts where he tried to grab the ball off the player he turned it over to, couldn't get the ball. It got just out of his reach, and then he chased and he laid a tackle, or at least tried to lay a tackle on. So those second, third, fourth efforts from a first game player, I think that really showed up some of the senior players who were utterly dreadful and just completely lacking.
Yep. I support that. I noted that effort at the time, and I liked the way he went back to clean up his mess. It was good on him.
Heather, you're good?
Yes, my good was Buddy Franklin passing Matthew Lloyd's tally on the goal kicking list to go to 7th. No matter what the circumstances were, obviously not terrific for the team last night. But Franklin now has been in the Swans side for a number of years. He's obviously well liked and respected by his peers. He is a giant of the game, and he's done some things on a football field that really make your eyes pop. And to achieve 7th on the all-time list is a terrific achievement, and I'm sure it's something he'll be proud of when he retires. There is a chance that he'll move into 6th or even 5th, depending, how his health stacks up. But I think that was for me that was a sort of a real positive on a night of a number of disappointments.
Yes, I agree. Now, my bad is Sam Reid dropping a soda when Richmond were piling on the goals in the second quarter. In the player ratings, I likened him to a soda machine, Heather. I said that coin in, soda out. And look, his marking ability for quite a number of years now, probably including those years he's been injured, I'm going to include those years as well, have been very poor. I think going all the way back to 2013, actually, when he injured his shoulder against North Melbourne, and since then he's just really lacked that confidence to take marks, overhead, chest marks. But yeah, that chest mark he dropped was unforgivable. It literally went in and just fell straight back out.
And he was right in front of goal, so let's assume he would have kicked that one.
Yes, exactly. And Heather, what is your bad?
Yes, my bad was the fact that this is actually not an individual thing here. This was from a team perspective, and let's include the coaches in on this bad as well. But going wide every single time out of defence was just, oh, God, it just reminded me of like the Fremantle Dockers. And you hated it then, and I hate seeing the red and white do it. And it just doesn't seem to me, it seems to be negative and overly conservative.
Yeah.
I understand that Richmond were doing their best to block up the corridor. I do understand that, but nobody was really willing to take the game on and give it a shot. I think I saw Tom Papley give it a go a few
He did,
times.
yeah.
He tried to try a couple of times. Going wide every single time is boring. It's slow. There's really very little opportunity to really make it happen there and develop some momentum and get that chain of sort of possessions going. And I just feel like it's a waste of time and it's really not great to watch. So if we could stop doing that even just a bit, that would be terrific.
The few times that we did actually attack the corridor, you're right, it was players like Papley and Kennedy who did some in-ball kicks and they did it really well. I know Florent did an awesome in-ball kick right into the middle and it set up perfect goal-scoring opportunities. I think we did get a couple of goals from it, certainly in the last quarter. And there was one when it hit Lance Franklin. The commentators were saying, the corridor, don't go corridor. I think it was Papley turned around, nailed Franklin. Franklin then went long in. So 2 kicks from defensive 50 to inside 50 in about 5 seconds.
But the point of that, Justin, is the fact that they had nothing to lose then because they knew they were going to lose. So all of a sudden they're sort of opening up a bit and taking some chances. I think the argument from a few people is, can we please play with a little more freedom? Let's have no expectations.
Yeah.
Play with a little more freedom and just try it. And yep, we might go down in a screaming heap by 100 points. But to me, there is, at this point in time, being 1-4, I don't feel like there's much to be lost by just trying that approach.
Exactly. My ugly, Heather, is Jake Lloyd's, one of his first kicks of the game. It was his first turnover, went straight to Daniel Rioli. I don't know what he was trying to do, but it was the first goal of the match. Daniel Rioli, he was never going to miss from like 30 metres out, and he put that straight through the sticks. That was an atrocious turnover, but it really was emblematic of the night itself, and it really signalled where the match was actually headed and where it was going to go. So it wasn't like a one-off. It was really like the start of it all.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was cringeworthy, and I'm sure Jake Lloyd will watch that replay and do a fair bit of cringing himself. And yeah, that was a gift for Daniel Rioli. He couldn't believe his luck.
No, it really was. And now, Heather, your ugly?
My ugly, unfortunately, was Kieran Jack's 250th. It was about as bad as Daniel Hannabury's 200th last year, which people may recall as being, well, I don't think I have to say anything further, really. I feel for Kieran Jack. I feel for his loved ones. I feel for all his supporters and fans. I really do, because he played really poorly. He had 8 possessions. He just didn't play a meaningful part in that match in any respect. I feel like he has less and less to give, and it's, for me, it's just, you get a bit sentimental. It's a sad way to go out, and I just feel for him because really that was just absolutely, well, shite, really.
It was. I think that was a gift of a 250th because his disposal efficiency was under 50%. So although he only had 8 possessions, he only did something with them about 3 or 4 times. So that's quite
extremely disappointing.
It is. It's very disappointing, and it's quite reflective of where he is in his career at the moment. And that's really been happening over the last 2 to 3 years, is that his numbers have really dropped off. His pressure has really dropped off, and his disposal efficiency has really, really dropped off to the point where, like last year, he was getting 15, 18 possessions at like 25, 30% disposal efficiency. So he was turning it over more than he did something good with it.
Well, he used to play. He used to win the ball himself. He tackled hard. He was a terrific, energetic midfielder. Then he was sort of moved into really more in the forward line, which I think was a reflection of the state of where we're at and the fact that where he was at and everything. But now he's not even making a contribution there. And I just feel like that for a player who is beloved by so many people, myself included, in the club, it's just
it's sentimental.
I'm wondering whether the time has come.
Yeah, it's I actually said it on the blog that it might be time to take him out behind the shed. Unfortunately, he's as good as a player he's been for us, but look, I think that contribution, I honestly can't see a place in the team for it. And as bad as people saying Justin McInerney was last week, he was burnt something shocking by his teammates. He didn't have a good game, but his teammates helped him have an absolute shocker. So, yeah, I just don't yeah. Sorry, Kieran Jack. I love you, but I think the time has come.
Yeah, I sort of feel the same. And I think just in closing, Justin, in terms of, sort of wrapping it up, I think my next question here is that, I'm looking forward to seeing how they play against Greater Western Sydney next week.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is here, my statement first is that I feel like that they've really got, that there's going to have to be some sort of incredible turnaround for them to win that match against GWS.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Which means 1 and 5. And my other question is here for people to ponder is, how long is it going to be before this sort of poor form and the results cumulatively over the last couple of seasons in particular, how long is it before this starts to affect, the club's financial bottom line? We're talking crowds, TV audiences, sales of merchandise, and what have you. I feel like that, the Sydney is a tough market. And at the moment, particularly on the back of that 2017 season, I just wonder how long it's going to be before some of the fair weathers fall off the bandwagon.
Yeah, and look, just to add to that, and also for our listeners to ponder, is whether or not the direction of the club is more reflective of money-raising venture or if it's more geared towards on-field performance. I have my feelings on that. I'm going to write about that later in the week. I'm also going to write about John Longmire and Lance Franklin, where they're at and what things are sort of going on there. So keep your eye out during the week for a couple of blog posts. We're also going to have some content from another one of our writers, Josh Marr. So again, keep your eye out for all of that. Heather, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure having you on.
It's an absolute pleasure to be asked, Justin, and an absolute delight. I do wish that it had been sort of a better result for us to talk about, but, positive thoughts for next time.
I all wish the Swans would win every week, but unfortunately it's not the case. Someone has to win. But look, everyone, you can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with the tag The Swans Blog. You can also get in touch with us during the week with the hashtags SwansCast and SwansCast Extra. We will be back on Thursday for the preview of the Greater Waste of Space game. Let's hope we can actually get a positive result out of that. Until next time, go Swans.